Thakur, and he was born in 1838, and he gave initiation to our Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, who's our Prabhupada's guru. So, and he was a very prominent scholar at the time, and so this was a very big deal, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj had to approach him several times and beg for initiation, and he did not want to initiate anybody. He was so humble. But eventually he saw the sincerity of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj and gave him initiation. So he came to Mayapur. For 30 years he lived in Vrindavan. He was, in his early childhood, early life, he lived in Bengal, East Bengal, which is Bangladesh now. And he got married, as was the time. But at a very young age, around when he was about 20 years old, he lost his wife. And then afterwards, he lost all interest in material life, and he just walked all the way to Vrindavan. And for 30 years, he spent time in Vrindavan. And after some time, he went to Varshana, and for 6 years of those years, he lived in Varshana. And while he was there, he used to gather flowers. He was very simple. He used to gather flowers and give these garlands to Radha and Krishna. He would make far. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur always used him as a nirapeksha, as an example that he had no material desires at all. His renunciation was beyond belief. He was the personification of renunciation. Then one day while he was living in Vrindavan, he got a dream, and in his dream, Radha and Krishna appeared and said, "You need to go live in Navadvip." They suggested that he lived in Navadvip, so on the order of Radha and Krishna, he walked all the way from Vrindavan and went back to Navadvip. And there he built a very simple hut of leaves and banana leaves and hay, dry grass, and he was just living there simply. Sometimes he did not even bother with that, he just lived on the banks of the river. And when it rained heavily, he would take shelter under the boats, upturned boats. So he basically led the life of a very simple mendicant. And he ate very simple, just dry, broken rice. Sometimes he didn't even care to boil it. So that's how renounced he was. And he would daily chant 2 lakh names of the Lord. So that was his daily thing. And he would be so always thinking, every minute of the day he would not waste. He was just thinking of Radha and Krishna. So he was on a very different platform from most of us. Once one of the local kings came and told him, I want you to come and live in my palace. I want your association. You're such a great devotee. So I want to interact with you. So please come and live in my palace. And so Gaurkishora Dasa Babaji Maharaj sent the messenger back saying, "I don't want to come live in your palace because I might be attracted to all your opulence," which was not true at all. He would not be, but he said, out of humility, he said, "But you can come and stay with me. I will build you a similar hut, and we can both peacefully chant together." And so after that, he never heard from the king. So that was the end of that king. And then once a married couple came to him and asked for advice and said, "What should we do? We want to advance in spiritual life." So he said, "You guys should live separately. You should not live together as husband and wife." And so they said, okay. So they went back home and they were living separately. After some time, they came back again to visit. And Babaji Maharaj said, "So how is it going? Are you living separately?" And they said, "Yes, we are." And then he said, "What are you doing for prasad? What are you doing for food? And what did you eat today?" So he said, "We ate rice, we ate dal, we ate fried eggplant." So they told everything they ate. And Babaji Maharaj said, "You're living separately, but you're associating with food. So you're still kind of materially attached, So you need to give that up and eat separately." When they heard that, they had enough of the austerity and they never came back again. And Maharaj said, "I'm giving them good advice, but they don't want to listen, so what can I do?" Similarly, one Sanatana Goswami, who's another great acharya in our line, it was his disappearance day. And Gaurkishora Dasa Babaji Maharaj said, "Let's have a very opulent feast," to one of his associates. And the associate said, "But we don't have anything, so how are we going to have the feast?" So he said, "We are going to fast all day and we're going to chant all day. That will be our very opulent feast." So that's how renounced he was, that's how he saw things. And then when he was a little bit, there was another couple who built some outhouses and some buildings for travelers and for shelter. And they said, please come and stay in our house. And they were very sincere and they really wanted to serve Babaji Maharaj. So Babaji Maharaj said, yes, I'll come, but only on one condition. I will be staying where the outhouses, where the toilets are. And so they said, how can we let you live there? So he said, that's the only condition, that's the only way I'll come. So then they cleaned their toilet really well, they cleaned that place, and so he could chant peacefully there. And he said, it is better to be near the smelly toilets than to smell the materialness, because materialness will not bother me if I'm living near a toilet. So that was the level of his renunciation. And then after some time, he turned blind. He went blind in his later life, but he refused treatment. And at that time, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj and Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, my son can take you to Calcutta, we can see a good doctor, we can get your eyesight back. But he said, I have no desire to get my eyesight back, and he just went away. Then when they pressed him, he said, you don't have to deal with the karmis, my son will deal with everything, you just have to go there. But he still refused. He just went away for 45 days and nobody knew where he was. And then he appeared back after 45 years and he said, I thought of drowning myself in the river, but then I thought I'm going to be a ghost and I cannot worship Radha and Krishna, so that was not acceptable for me, so I came back. And he said, the reason why I went away is I do not like to accept service from anybody. So even from his own disciple, he did not want any service. And for the rest of his life, he was blind and he just chanted. And one time there was a snake came into his hut, and one of the people saw it and said, Babaji Maharaj, there's a snake in your hut, there's a snake in your hut. But he was very calm. He had no reaction. He just went on chanting. Then after some time, the person came back and said, and seen the snake just circled him and slithered away from the hut. And afterwards, the person came back and said, Babaji Maharaj, what happened? What happened to the snake? What happened to you? You're okay. And he said, I got to associate with Ananta Shesh, and I'm very happy. So this is how he saw things very transcendentally. He was not disturbed by anything mundane. While he was and then one time, one of the karmi materialistic people want to come and get his darshan. And some people just want to bother the other people and just ask for benedictions, and he just wanted to get rid of him. He said, unless he gives 2 rupees, he cannot see me. And in those days, 2 rupees is a very big amount. So he thought, I've gotten rid of it. But that guy came back and said, here's 2 rupees. And his associate said, Babaji Maharaj, what can we do? He did give the money. So he opened the door and he said, here, you saw me, right? And he shut the door right after that. So he had nothing to do with this guy. And similarly, when he was in Vrindavan, he used to beg for chapati, for madhukari, with the sweeper community, the bangis, they call them, who sweep the streets. And the upper caste people said, you're an upper caste person, why should you go to these lower caste people, and why are you taking prasad from them? You should not go and beg from them. But he always saw things transcendently. He said they are associated with the dust of Vrindavan. They are always with the dust of Vrindavan. So as far as I'm concerned, they're great devotees. And he also said during the time of Dwaraka, when Krishna was in Dwaraka, these people requested to be born in Vrindavan as the sweeper community, so they could sweep the dust of Vrindavan. And there are many pure devotees walking in Vrindavan. So this is how they transcend. So he saw things not like other ordinary people. He saw things very transcendently. And he went and always associated, did whatever he wanted, and this is how he honored the Dhamvasis. One time a person came to Navadvip and he wanted to buy land in Navadvip. And he said, what can I do? Can you help me buy some land? And he said, this is not ordinary land. This is sacred land. So even a speck of this land, if you bring all the jewels in the entire world, it's not going, this land is priceless. You cannot buy and sell this land. That is how his vision was. He was always looking at things beyond the mundane vision. When he first came to Navadvip, all he had is a basket, and he had a cap of tiger skin and some strands of cloth where he knotted them, and that's how he chanted his round, sometimes on the knotted cloth. That's how austere and simple he was. And he gave this as a gift to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami, his only disciple. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur knew the greatness of Babaji Maharaj, and so he told told his son, you should take initiation from this great devotee. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was a very erudite scholar of his time. He knew all the Vedas, he had read all the books. He was one of the most well-read and educated person of the time. And Gaurkishora Dasa Babaji Maharaj was an illiterate person. He could not even sign his name, he could not read and write. But whenever he spoke, it was as if the Vedas were coming out of his mouth. So people, the power of his devotion was so much that he would affect people just by his presence. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur knew his greatness and told his son, you should take initiation from this person. And so when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Swami approached him, he said, I'm a very simple person. I'm an illiterate person and you're a great scholar, so how can you take initiation from me? It's impossible. Plus, I do not want to give initiation to anybody. I just want to be left alone. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Swami repeatedly came over and over again. And then one time he said, okay, next time I speak to Mahaprabhu, I will ask him if I should give you initiation. So he went home, and then next day he came back and he said, did you ask Mahaprabhu? He said, I talked to Mahaprabhu, but I forgot to ask him. So he said, please, can you ask again next time you talk? So after some time he came back and asked, did you ask him? And he said, I asked him, but Mahaprabhu said, I don't have to initiate you. I don't have to necessarily initiate you. And at that time, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati felt so sad. He said, what is the use of my education or my scholarliness? It is just to serve a person like you. And if you're not going to accept my service, and if you're not going to initiate me, I will just drown myself in the river. And there was a bridge there, and he was ready to go and jump in the river and kill himself. But when Gaurkishora Dasa Babaji saw how sincere he was, he said, okay, I will give you initiation. Go take bath in the Saraswati river. And then he came back and he gave him the name Vrishabhanu Devi Dayite Nama Das, which means Vrishabhanu Devi is Radharani, Dayite is her mercy. So he said, you're the mercy of Radharani. That's the name he gave him. And so, oh my God, probably my phone. So even though he was illiterate, like I said, he became the guru of one of the most erudite scholars of the time. Then one time, people were criticizing the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, saying that you're chanting the Gaura Gayatri, which is the second mantra of our Gayatri mantra, the second round of mantras. He said, why are you chanting Gaura Gayatri? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a great scholar, he's a great sannyasi, he's a great personality, but he's not God. Why are you giving him the status of God? And then so he organized a debate, and he had a meeting organized. And in that he explained according to scripture, he quoted from the Atharva Veda, he quoted from Chaitanya Bhagavat, he quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam, he quoted from Shvetashvara Upanishad. So several places he quoted. And by Shastric evidence, he proved that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the Yuga avatar and came to follow the Yuga Dharma. And so, but nobody noticed that in a corner, Gaurkishora Dasa Babaji was sitting and listening to the whole presentation. And he was so proud of his disciple that he called him Prabhu. He said, this scholarliness is truly the mercy of Rupa Goswami and Raghunath Goswami. That is why he was really proud, and this way Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Swami Goswami earned the praise of his spiritual master. And then on Uttana Ekadashi, which is today, we are following in 1915, he disappeared from this world. Gaurkishora Dasa Babaji disappeared from this world. And when he disappeared, there was a big controversy. The other Babajis, the local people said, we have to keep his body, because they knew how much he was revered by the local people, that if they have their samadhi, they can make money out of that, they would get tourists. So they were commercially inclined, and so they wanted to keep his body and build his samadhi. But Gaurkishora Dasa Babaji, Bhaktisiddhanta Swami Goswami Maharaj went there, and he said, I am his only disciple. I might be a brahmachari, but I am the only one who's qualified to get his body, because I am the only one who's following his directions. And his instructions in life, And then he said, if anybody here has not associated, these Babajis are supposed to be celibate, but they all had relations with women on the side. So he said, if any of you have, for the last 1 year, 1 month, or 1 week, have not associated with a woman, then you can touch the body. Otherwise, you have no right. Something really bad will happen to you. At that time, they got scared, all of them. And the police constable was there thinking that there's going to be violence, and so the police were there. And the police said, should we investigate? And that made them even more afraid because they knew that they were living bad lives. So, but Goswami Maharaj said, Bhaktisiddhanta Swami Maharaj said that, no, I will take their word for them. But one by one, they all disappeared. And then he was able to build his Guru Maharaj Samadhi in Kulia Gram, where he used to do his bhajan, where his bhajan kutir was. But later, because of the course of the Ganga changing the course, the river, the Samadhi was moved to Mayapur, and today his Samadhi is in Mayapur. And like I said, he's a very austere, mystical figure in our line of acharyas. And today is his disappearance day. On appearance and disappearance day, the acharyas are really merciful. So you get special benefit from glorifying them, from listening to them, from talking about them. So this was a little presentation on Gaurkishora Dasa Babaji. Today is also the starting of Bhishma Panchaka. And Bhishma, it is the 5 last days of Kartik. It's the end of Kartik. And they said you follow special austerities on those last 5 days. And if you do that, they say that there is a lot of spiritual benefit you get from following these austerities on Bhishma Panchaka. Bhishma Pitamaha is one of the 12 Mahajans. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 12 great personalities that are mentioned that we should follow. And his life was an example of austerity and renunciation. And he lived among great opulence. He lived in palaces. He lived in around royalty. But still he was very, very simple and very renounced. And that is a very hard thing to do. There is the Nivrati Marg and there is the Pravriti Marg. The Pravriti Marg is a path for householders, and the Nivrati Marg is the path for sannyasis, for renunciates. And he lived in the Pravriti Marg because he was around great opulence and great enjoyment, but he lived very simply in the Nivrati Marg. So that is a very hard thing to do. It's easy to follow austerity when you're around people who are also austere and you're in a spiritual environment. But in a material environment, when there is great opulence, when there is royalty around you, and everybody's enjoying, to live that simple, austere life is very, very difficult. And so he did that, and he showed us how to, by his life example, he showed us how we should live. And also by the way he passed away, not only with his living, but the way he departed from this world, he gave us many lessons to learn from. And among the Mahajans, there's 12 of them, and they are like mentioned, especially in the Bhagavatam, they are like Lord Brahma, Narada, Shiva, the 4 Kumaras, Kapila, the son of Devahuti, Swayambhu Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janak Maharaj, and Bhishma Dev is one of them, Bali Maharaj, Shukadev Goswami, and Yamadhar Maharaj. These are the 12 Mahajans that are mentioned in the Bhagavatam who we should follow. And Lord Chaitanya said, he lived by this verse, said, Mahajanena yena gata supanta. So whatever a great person does, ordinary people will follow. So that's why Bhishma is such an example to us, because for the ordinary people, he's such an example of how to live and perfect his life. And this part of the Srimad Bhagavatam appears because, just like Arjuna was put under illusion so that Krishna could speak the Bhagavad Gita, similarly, Yudhishthir Maharaj was put under illusion so that Bhishma Dev could give him some life lessons. So the word, how he got the name Bhishma, he was the son of an emperor, Shantanu Chakravarti. And Shantanu once was going on the river Ganga, he was walking or he was riding his horse, and he sees this very beautiful woman come out. And he was so attracted to her and he wanted to marry her. So he said, can you be my wife? And she said, yes, I will be your wife, but under one condition. No matter what I do, you should not question my actions. I should be free to do whatever I want. So he was so in fact, he said, okay, that's not a problem. You can do whatever you want. So we can get married. And so they got married. And she was a very dutiful wife. She did everything wonderfully well. But when they got a first child, they got a son, and he was so happy because as a king, he's going to get another heir to the throne. But she took to the baby and threw him in the Ganga water. She came back and she was smiling. And he thought, what kind of a woman is this? She kills her own child. So this way, 7 times he had a child with her, and it's always a son, and 7 times the child was thrown in the water. 8th time, Maharaj Shantanu could not bear anymore. He said, what kind of a woman are you? You're killing your own children. At that time, she said, I told you that you shouldn't, but you love this child, so I will let this child stay with you, and you can raise this child, but I have to leave. She was Ganga herself. She was personification of Ganga Devi. She was the river Ganga personified who had come. And those 7 kids that she killed, and she tells their past life, they were the Vasus, and they were cursed to die at infancy. Because what they had done is they had stolen the cow of Vashishta, a Kamadhenu cow. Anybody who drank the milk of that cow would be forever youthful, would not get any disease. So it was a very special cow. So they wanted to steal this cow. So Prabhas, one of the Vasus, his wife said, let's steal that cow. And these 8 Vasus got together and they stole the cow. And because they stole the cow, they were cursed to die. The 7 of them were just conspirators. They did not actually steal. Prabhas, the one that stole, they said, you're going to live a very long life in this world, of very good life and very famous life, but you will have to live in this world. So he lived a very long life like that. And so then Ganga, of course, disappears. So Maharaj Shantanu is bringing up his son. But then after some time, he was lonely, he's alone, he goes again. When he went out, he met this beautiful woman, Satyavati. This man always finds beautiful women. And so he said, would you marry me? And she said, you have to ask my father. But she was the daughter of a fisherman. So her name was Satyavati. And so once she goes to when he takes her father said, yes, you can marry my daughter, but on one condition. My grandson, who's born of my daughter, should be the next king. And Shantanu said, how can this is the royal order is the first son always becomes the king. He's such a qualified person. How can I do this to my son? So he goes home and he's sad, but he's just, and then, his name is Devavrata at this time, Bhishma's name. And so he will say, why are you sad, my father? And he says, because he explains. And he says, oh, that's a simple thing. So he goes to the fisherman and says, I will renounce my rights to the throne and your daughter's son can become king. And so he says, you might do that, but what about your children? They'll be warriors and they might take the kingdom. So he said, I vow to live a life of lifelong celibacy. I will never marry. I will never have children. So when he takes this oath, the demigods will shower flowers and say, Bhishma, Bhishma. Bhishma means one who takes a terrible oath and fulfills it. And so that's how he got the name Bhishma. So anyway, at this particular junction of history, Yudhishthir Maharaj is going where Bhishma Dev is lying on a bed of arrows in Kurukshetra. And he's very depressed, he's very morose. He thinks the whole war was fought because of me. There are so many widows, there was so much bloodshed, so many kids are orphaned, so many parents have lost their son, and it's all because I had to sit on the throne of Hastinapur. So because of me, all this destruction has happened. So he was very, very sad. And most of us, even when we are to blame, we don't take fault. But Yudhishthir Maharaj is such a shining example. Even though he's faultless, he was taking the blame on himself. And so Krishna said, we should go to Kurukshetra and talk to your grandfather. And they dress very opulently. They go on procession. They take golden chariots, the finest horses, the best clothes. That's because Krishna knew Bhishma's heart. Bhishma was always sad, even though he fought on the side of the Kauravas. When the Pandavas were persecuted, he was very, very sad always because he really loved them. So Krishna knew that seeing them in great opulence would get him great pleasure and make him happy. So they dressed in their finest clothes and they went and approached Bhishma Dev. And there Bhishma Dev started talking to Yudhishthir Maharaj, and he said, you should not take the blame upon yourself. You are faultless. And this whole war was orchestrated by Krishna. And today it is your duty to go and rule the kingdom. and by this lamentation, is disturbing your duty, and you should do everything. And then he gives him, there's the longest discourse it's called Shanti Parvat and Anushasan Parva in the Mahabharata. They're the 12th and 13th Parvas. And the longest conversation is between Yudhishthira Maharaj and Bhishma Dev, who's giving him, he talks about morality, he talks about ethics, he talks about how a king should rule, how he should deal with his enemies, how he should keep his subjects happy. So practically everything under the sun, Yudhishthira Maharaj is questioning him, and he is answering all the questions. And so this way there is a big dialogue, and it's, like I said, the longest dialogue in Mahabharata, which covers several chapters. And then, when they first approached Bhishma Dev, the Pandavas bowed down, but Krishna also bowed down to Bhishma Dev. And there are many reasons for it. One, he was a senior person because of etiquette. Secondly, Krishna was showing how much he loves his devotees, that he's ready to put himself in a subordinate position just to give pleasure to his devotees. So Bhishma Dev starts by saying, you are faultless, but you have to go through such trials and tribulations. And after Kunti, actually, Bhishma Dev suffered the most because he loved his grandchildren. He knew that they were right, but his hands were tied. As a Mahajan, he had to show loyalty to the king, so he had to fight on the side of the Kauravas. And but everybody has to suffer in this world. Prabhupada says, people with good karma have to suffer, people with bad karma have to suffer in this world. This material world is a place of suffering. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Bhuvanar Loka, in that shloka, from the highest planet, from Brahma Loka to the Patal Loka, every place is a place of misery, where repeated birth and death take place. So no matter how happy our life is, at the end of our life we have to have old age and disease and death. So that is guaranteed for everybody. So it's like you can't be in the ocean and not be wet. So you can't be in the material world and not have distress and unhappiness. Unhappiness is par for the course. So we have to be unhappy. Now that we are in this material world, there has to be some amount of unhappiness. There's some amount of happiness too, but for the most part, this is a place of impermanence. Dukhalayam shashvatam, he says, it's a place of misery and unhappiness and non-permanence. And there is danger at every step. So no matter who you are, Prahlad Maharaj was in danger, Pandavas were in danger, Harudas Thakur was in danger, Ambarish Maharaj was in danger, Prabhupada was in. So regardless of whether you're a devotee, whether you're a good person, a bad person, everybody has to have some amount of suffering in this material world, because this is a place of suffering. It's designed to be that way. But for devotees, this is at the end of your life, you can go back to God and associate with God. So Bhishma Dev taught us how to live a life that will take us closer to God. At least in our next life, we will either get path on the goal is to go back to Godhead. So either you go back or you get closer to the goal. So you get into a life situation where you're getting closer to God. So that is the whole purpose of life. And Bhishma Pitamaha taught this big principle. And so then, there's another thing they said. Everybody in the war of Kurukshetra went back. And Prabhupada says not all emperors were good. Some were wicked, some were cruel, some had their sinful behavior, some were unethical. It's not that every person fighting the war was a good person. They were good people, but they were bad people too. But regardless of whether they were good or bad, at the end of their life, those who participated in the war went back to God, and they got their Gataswarupa, they said. Netre Pibanti, they said they were drinking the beauty of Krishna's face with their eyes, and Parthastra Bhuta, they said, so Partha's arrows sucked all their sinful reactions. I'd heard a lecture from Radhesham Prabhu. He gives a graphic example. When you put water on a hot griddle, how everything gets sucked, the water. So that way, when the arrows pierced them, all their bad reactions as well as their pious reactions were sucked away from them. And because all eyes were watching Krishna, because at their time of death they were watching the Lord, they went back to their place in the spiritual sky. So they all went back to their original form without exception. So this reminds me of a beautiful pastime. Once Radharani was, there were some clouds, and Radharani was looking at the clouds and saying, "Can you give a message to Shyam Sundar for me?" And the clouds said, "Surely we will, but can you tell us who Krishna is?" The clouds were, of course, great devotees. Everybody in Vrindavan is a devotee, but they just wanted to hear about Krishna from Radharani's lips. So just to give them that pleasure, they said, "Who is Krishna? Can you tell us who is Krishna?" And she said, "That's very easy. I can tell he has a peacock feather, he's wearing yellow garments, he's wearing a Vaijayanti mala. I can give you all those descriptions. But the best description is wherever all eyes are watching, that person is Krishna." So they said, like in the Kurukshetra war, all eyes were watching Krishna. When Krishna was in Mathura, all the people, the ladies, royal ladies, went on their rooftops to look at Krishna. When Krishna was dancing on the Kaliya serpent, all the demigods and their wives came to watch that. So any place where everybody is focused on, that person is Krishna, you know. So she explained that beautifully, and they said, and actually the clouds and the oceans were already devotees. When Krishna was born, the cloud told the ocean, "You will be described by Krishna's quality, and I will be explained by Krishna's form." So we say, Karuna Sindhu, you know, you explain Krishna is merciful like the ocean, they say, so give the example of the ocean. And the clouds, they say, Meghasham, you know, he's the color of cloud complexion. So I will be describing Krishna's form, and you will be describing Krishna's quality. So they already had that conversation. So they were already devotees, they knew about Krishna, but Radharani gives this beautiful thing that where all eyes are watching, that is Krishna, you know, that is I don't know how much time I have. Similarly, the passing away of Haridas Thakur is very similar to that of Bhishma Dev. Just 500 years ago, Lord Chaitanya was personally present at the passing of Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur said, "I know you're going to wind your pastimes soon in this world, and I don't want to see your pastimes, ending pastimes, so I want to leave this world before that. Please grant me that wish." And then all devotees gathered together at the Siddhabakula, and Haridas Thakur had a glorious departure, very similar, very almost identical to Bhishma Dev. And Bhishma Dev too, at the end of his life, he was focusing on the Parthasarathi, you know, Krishna as Arjuna's charioteer. That was the picture in his mind. And he was exalting the gopis as the highest devotees. And he was also talking about Rajasuya Yajna that Yudhishthira Maharaj did, and declared that Krishna is the greatest person in this universe. So he was thinking of all that, and then he was also, you know, throughout this dialogue, he was talking to his grandfather, and then the sun was in the northern hemisphere and it was going down, and at that time he stopped talking altogether, withdrew all his senses, and he said everybody fell silent, like how the birds at night, suddenly the birds stopped chirping. And there were so many sages there. There was Narada Muni, there was Sukadev Goswami, there was Parashuram with all his disciples, there's Asita, practically every Muni, every person, Bharadwaj Muni, all of them, Asita, Devala, they were all there. And they all fell silent. And they said that even the demigods came to watch the departure of Bhishma. And after Bhishma departed, they all showered flowers. And then Yudhishthira Maharaj did the last rites of Bhishma Dev. And you know, and they all went back to Hastinapur, and Yudhishthira Maharaj started ruling as the emperor of the world. Similarly, Haridas Thakur also had a very similar departure where the Lord was personally present, and he was able to look at the Lord's face and leave his body. And every single devotee there remembered the departure of Bhishma Dev and saw the parallels, saw the similarities between the two. And because of Prabhupada, we have this knowledge, we have this through our parampara and Prabhupada's mercy, the holy name and the knowledge of the path of bhakti is all over the world today. And so we owe Prabhupada the depth of gratitude, because otherwise we would not know anything about what our life should be, what we should be. And there is so much information about how the Lord interacts with the devotees, how the devotees love the Lord, you know, the path of bhakti, and the faith in the holy name. Prabhupada had tremendous faith in the holy name and in the words of his spiritual master, and he traveled all over the world, and within a short period of time, within almost 11 or 12 years, he brought Krishna consciousness to the world. Today there's more than 650 temples, several farm communities, and everybody has this great literature that nobody even knew. You know, the Bhagavad Gita today, Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita is the most widely read Bhagavad Gita in the entire world and is published in several languages. And there were before copies of Bhagavad Gita, but nobody became a devotee of Krishna by reading that. But Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita has transformed so many lives, and not just Indian people, people all over the world, every part of the corner, there is now a temple. People have heard of Hare Krishna, people have heard of the Mahamantra, and he has popularized the Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So it's 4:45, I was told to stop. Does anybody have any questions or should I continue? I don't know. No questions? Sure.
Maybe very naive.
Yeah.
When you say that we all come to this world and we all have to go through suffering,
Mm-hmm.
to begin with, why did God create that suffering? What is the reason?
God does not create suffering. It is our own karmic reactions that we get. God is impartial. God is equal to everybody. By definition, God is equal to everybody. God is not partial to anybody. So we have our own set of desires. It is our actions that get reactions. So all of us in some other lifetime have created something wrong or whatever. And so we are getting the reactions of our past actions. So if it is logical, if God is impartial, loves everybody, why are some kids born blind? You know, there are little babies that are born blind without vision. And so you can see that in so little babies, faultless, at least in this life they didn't do anything. So we look at our life as only this one snapshot, but it's not just one snapshot. There's the past, there's a vast future. So this is a series of lifetimes. So we might have done something else in our previous life that we don't know anything about now, but we are getting the reaction of that. And it doesn't mean that God is just wicked and just wants to punish everybody. In fact, God wants us to go back and live with Him happily. So they say you take one step towards God, God takes 10 steps towards you. So God is actually more eager to take us back than we are eager to go. But because of our own desires and because of our own actions, past actions, sometimes we have to suffer the reactions. And this material world, we are here to separate, enjoy. We want to enjoy separately from God. That's why we are here. Because of our desire to enjoy separately. And the only way we can enjoy separately from God is come to the material world. Then we can pretend God doesn't exist, there are atheists, there's all kinds of people. And God doesn't disturb that thinking. You know, He gives you the freedom to do whatever you want. So if you want to be devoted, you can. But if you don't, He doesn't demand it, because love cannot be demanded. God just wants love. He's called Bhavagrahi Janardhan. He doesn't see the action, He sees the love behind the action. So when we offer flowers, when we offer fruit, God has everything. God doesn't need anything from us. But because of the emotion, the love that we offer, that's what He wants. So even if you give Him a leaf, a flower, a fruit, in the Bhagavad Gita it says He will accept it with love. So that's my...
It's very complex, this whole thing.
It is. It doesn't mean that we can't improve our lives. We have human lives, and human life is the only life where you can actually think about your actions, when you can be responsible for your actions. In animal life, you have no responsibility. You just act or answer most of your questions.
When you compare animals to humans, I think animals are better. They know their checking order better than human beings do. I think animals are more considerate than human beings. That's how I look at it.
Well, animals...
They may not have intelligence, but they have a better pecking order than human beings, from what I see. Again,
But they cannot improve their lives, right? An animal cannot do this or that. They just live by instinct, right? That's not a good situation. You should be able to decide, do I do this or do I do the other thing? But animals, if they have good masters, maybe they have a good life, but there are people who abuse animals. Recently I read a paper.
That's again, a human being is doing that. Animal is still good to you. It is using it.
I know, but the animal is suffering. The animal doesn't have control over the suffering. If the master is good to them, they are good. If they are bad, if they beat you, they do something, the animal has to. A human being can walk away or do something about it. The animal doesn't have that much power over their life, or what should I say? So much opportunity that human beings have. I'm not saying human beings are better than animals. There are, even in Shastra, there is animals, there's Jadabarat, there's a lot of stories where even animals have, progressed. But generally speaking, human life is better than animal life. Yes? Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I think like with animals, they can't really change their nature. Like if they're a tiger, they have to stay being a tiger. They have to eat meat. Whereas a human being can get to the crossroads and say, well, eating meat really isn't so good. I could change that. Whereas a tiger can't do that, or a dog can't do that. So we're in a much better situation than an animal. An animal kind of just has to be the way he's meant to be. I don't know if that helps.
It's just more food for thought, but I don't know, from what goes on in this world today, when you see human beings, what they're doing,
Yeah.
you
Well,
wonder how much
agree.
intelligence is really helping,
That's why we say it's a hierarchy. Like an insect is even lower than an animal.
That's human beings that describe it. God did say that. He say that. But that's even the hierarchy has been built by human beings, right? We just came up to this is lower, this is highest. It wasn't defined. I mean, whatever is happening today, human beings are defining those rules, those guidelines, those hierarchies, right?
But human beings are the topmost, like whichever way you look at it, whichever scripture, it doesn't have to be. Human beings have more intelligence and have more discerning power, and that makes us different from animals. And whether,
I want to add.
Go ahead.
Like that is not defined by the human, because say for example, two things: fly and bees, honey bees. If you look the nature of those, the fly always look for the instinct, bad things. Even roses of flowers are there. It looks somewhere where the fruits are there. But the honey bees always look in the bad things, in the dustbin or anywhere. It will look always good things. So that is not defined by human, it's defined by nature. They are doing their job according to their nature. It's not controlled by the human being. I'm trying to explain this.
Yeah. 10 more minutes? Any more questions? No questions? We have wonderful books on the book table. We can, Bhagavad Gita as it is. And for you to, looks like you're a very thoughtful person and you like to ask thoughtful questions. The Srimad Bhagavatam, it's the 12 cantos, it's 18 volumes. Practically every question is answered. Every question that you can ever think of. The Bhagavad Gita has 700 verses, it does, but it's more of a dialogue. Everybody knows the Bhagavad Gita, but I would highly encourage you to read Prabhupada's version. And a lot of things are explained in logical, where you can actually make sense. And then the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita is spoken by the Lord himself on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where Arjuna is put under illusion and he's asking the questions and the Lord is giving the answers, and everything is explained that we are not our bodies, we are spirit souls, what happens to the body, so everything is explained. But the Srimad Bhagavatam is about the devotees of the Lord. It tells you everything, because the whole premise of Bhagavatam is, Bhagavatam starts where Parikshit Maharaj is cursed to die in 7 days, and he asked the question, what is the duty of a person who's about to die? And if you look at it, every one of us is about to die. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but every person, death is guaranteed for every, death and taxes, they say, are guaranteed. You can't escape taxes and death. So once you're born in this world, which means maybe in 100 years, maybe in 90 years, maybe in 80 years, you are going to die. That's a guarantee.
We just don't know
when it's going to come. So, what is the duty of a person who's about to die? That question is relevant to all of us, because we're all about to die. With every day that's passing, our lives are getting shorter and shorter. He died in the presence of the Lord, came to him, even though he was on a bed of arrows and he could not move. The Lord came to him. So how glorious is his departure. And he was thinking of the Lord. He was, and because the Lord was present, he said when he was focusing, all his pain went away, even though they said that from head to toe he was on a bed of arrows, and even 2 fingers could not go through the arrows. That's how close the arrows were. So can you imagine how painful a situation it is? But because he was talking about the Lord, because he was focusing on the Lord, he did not have any pain. He did not experience any discomfort. And how to depart from this world, how to live in this world and how to depart from this world. So he's one of the exemplary people that we can learn from, And because of we are, as human beings, as thoughtful people, we can question, we can say why we are here, what is there. See, animals cannot question. Can a dog question, why am I here, what am I doing? Those intellectual curiosity is not allowed to the lower animals. I'm just using the dog as an example. It could be any animal, it could be a cat, it could be a mouse. Any of the animals, they don't have enough to question about their lives. We do. That distinguishes us from the animals, and that's why it's definitely a better life. Even though we might have difficulty, we might be suffering, we might have some diseases, we might be in a painful condition, still because of our capacity to intellectually think, to inquire, to read, to get information, to get knowledge. We have the knowledge-seeking senses, which the lower animals don't have that. And that's why human life is definitely far better than to be born in the lower species. That is the fear of everybody, that we go into the lower species. And now that we have achieved of human life, we have to think about how to get out of this life of birth and death, constant birth and death. And to be always happy, to be not have distress in our lives, and to be constantly happy. And the only way to achieve it is by going back to the spiritual world. And all that information of how to get there, what to do, are in Prabhupada's books. So please, if you have a time, stop by and look and do some inquiry. Yeah. Yes, Prabhu.
How much better is the spiritual world than the material world?
They said there is no distress. Every talking is like song. Every like there's dance. There is nothing to be distressed with. It's permanent. The spiritual world, the material world is impermanent. So that makes us happy when people around us die or people around us fall sick. So there is birth, old age, disease, and death. And none of that is there in the spiritual world. And in the spiritual world, time is there by its absence, is conspicuous by its absence. Here everything is controlled by time. But in the spiritual world, time is there. They say Ashtakalya Leela is there just for the pleasure of the Lord. There are the seasons, there is morning, evening, just so that he can do different pastimes. But time stands still. Wouldn't we all like that? Srila Prabhupada ki. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, press that. Press that. Yeah. Thank you.